Welcome to I Hate James Dobson, a podcast about the two genders, PowerPoint and Excel. Welcome to I Hate James Dobson. Joining me, as always, is my favorite type of balsamic vinaigrette, Brooke. Brooke, how are you?
Oh, so good. So happy to be here with you again, Jake.
It's been a hot second since we recorded. Mm-hmm. What do you remember about Dobson? How would you describe Dobson to a stranger?
Yeah, I don't know that you've fully taken into account how much I completely repress these podcasts the minute they're over. So I remember that I hate him. Mm-hmm. I remember last time, refresh me, last time did we talk about wives? How to scold your wife?
Basically.
Okay, yeah. That was horrifying. Women. Oh, it was women.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, God. Why do I don't want to remember that.
So, last time we talked about his third book, horribly named What Wives Wish Their Husbands Knew About Women.
Say it again faster.
What Wives Wish Their Husbands Knew About Women. Yes, it's... whatever. A book where Dobson mansplains women to women.
Right. Thank you, Dobson.
Highlights for me include, if your wife can't keep the house clean, trick a teenage girl into being your housekeeper. Mm-hmm. So that was written in the before times.
Yeah.
We're going to skip ahead a little bit. Fast forward to the distant future, the year 2001.
Okay. Wow.
In an otherwise calm year in the United States, Dobson made a cultural explosion unrivaled by any other cultural event.
Wait, did you say 2001 was a calm year?
And that this was a cultural explosion? Yes, I did.
Okay.
And truly, I mean this unironically, this book is a feat. I have not been so full of rage in a long time.
No, Jake.
This evil manuscript is more cursed than Necronomicon, more evil than Aleister Crowley, and more repulsive than Yo Mama.
I just want to remind our beloved audience that I don't know this subject until we start recording, and I am so scared.
Dobson's trajectory between these three books, Dare to Discipline, What Wives Wish Their Husbands Knew About Women, and this book, is fascinating. Dare to Discipline was misguided and self-aggrandizing, but more or less focused on one idea. What Wives Wish Their Husbands Knew About the Clitoris was organized around a top 10 list of women's problems, but was slightly less focused and a little bit more political. This book is downright unhinged, filled with tangential rants about culture war and giving minimal actual parenting advice. We're going to get into the book that made me want to kill myself at 17. Ladies and gentlemen, Bringing Up Boys.
Oh no! Oh no!
Practical advice and encouragement for those shaping the next generation of men.
Oh no. Bringing Up Boys. Ow!
Over 2 million copies sold.
Oh my God.
We
should tell everybody what the picture on the cover is.
This is what inspired our podcast cover.
Yeah.
It is a young boy getting his face licked by a dog in, like, simplistic, minimalistic font.
Okay, great. In 2001.
In 2001. I will probably post somewhere. I have so many tabs for this.
Yeah.
And they're all color-coded.
Yeah.
There's one chapter that we're going to get to in part 2 where pretty much it's just all red, which is, this is the most insane shit I've ever read.
Wow. Wait, I have one more question. I'm really sorry. I'm just really amped tonight.
I love it.
I don't usually want a spoiler about what the books are since I have no idea, but I have to be emotionally ready. Is there going to be a Bringing Up Girls book?
There is one that Dobson writes. Not here, not today.
Okay.
We'll get to it. I'm actually not sure that I'm going to read it.
Okay.
We'll talk about that in part 2.
All right.
Well, if we do, we'll have a different focus, but there absolutely is one. And also these have been revised. Unlike Dare to Discipline, I did not read the updated versions of them. Okay. I just could not subject myself to that. Unlike previous books, I'm not going to go chapter by chapter debunking every claim. In this, our first episode, we're going to look at the arguments Dobson makes in this waste of paper. In the second episode, we're going to look how this pathetic excuse for toilet paper fits into a larger political movement that is evangelicalism. Obviously, this book is going to present a bad view of masculinity, and we're going to critique it and make fun of it. However, Brooke, I want you to think about what a healthy version of masculinity is. For you, what is non-toxic masculinity? Personally, subjectively, we don't have to say for everyone, just in your mind, in your brain. Don't answer me now. We're going to talk about it at the end of this episode.
Okay.
And with that, let's dig into bringing up boys. This book kind of has A plus B equals C to it. The argument, the first one, boys and girls are fundamentally different. With the subtext of boys are superior.
Oh.
Socialists, feminists, and homosexual activists have poisoned the culture and waged war on masculinity. Therefore, we need to teach boys to be real men again.
Okay, I'm gonna just have another little sip of this whiskey. Just the idea that feminism is in any way anything negative, right? Okay. All right, go on.
Oh, when we get to that second section, I'm sure you'll have many, many thoughts. And I'm very excited for them. But we're going to start with boys and girls are fundamentally different, parentheses, and boys are superior. There's some just like random examples of like, boys do this and girls do this that I just want to start with because I just find them very silly and confusing. Consider again, quote, the basic tendencies of maleness and femaleness. Because it is a privilege and a blessing of women to bear children, they are inclined toward predictability, stability, security, caution, and steadiness. Most of them value friendships and family above accomplishments or opportunities. The strength of men, entrepreneurial enterprise, independent thinking, building, risk-taking, planning, and leadership.
Oh my God.
Does the Y chromosome contain the entrepreneurial leadership gene?
Why couldn't all those things exist for everybody?
Stuff like this, that's just an appeal to a version of common sense, is throughout all of this book. And every time it happens like this, he states it so confidently, and it makes me laugh. Some of them, I can kind of get like where he's coming from. Some of them are just like, what? Even giving you the benefit of the doubt, I don't understand what this means. For example, men have the remarkable ability to ignore anything that doesn't interest them. This is a talent that drives women crazy.
A talent.
A talent. We put talents in air quotes. But that just feels like projection to me. That feels like a fight he had with Shirley.
Absolutely it is.
Or a fight they've had a number of times.
Say it again. Men do what now?
Men have the remarkable ability to ignore anything that doesn't interest them.
I mean, what does that even mean? They're just not paying attention. And really what it is that, okay, really what that is that women have the remarkable ability to notice everything around them because they by nature have to be hypervigilant to survive in the world.
In this, he's specifically talking about how his wife's astounded that he can write and have the TV on in the background. Which is a thing she can't do, apparently.
Yes, she can.
So, all these appeals to common sense, there's also a lot of biblical stuff they're going to get into. Is Dobson saying, this is how I see men and women currently, so that must be how they're supposed to be, inherently and inerrantly. Just throughout the book, they're fundamentally different. But this book is unique because it goes a step further than just asserting these things, and he talks about some science. Bad science, obviously, but talks about some science. Now, I'm really interested to have you on this because you and I both specifically work with trans people, gender diverse people of all kinds. And doing that work with trans people, especially seeing a person transition, you do get a really good understanding of what like biological sex, meaning hormones, the impact that can have on a person, their physical appearance, but also personality, right? So some of these things are not totally off base until Dobson starts actually like giving his 2 cents about them. But first is testosterone. Dobson says, quote, testosterone is responsible in humans, at least in part, for what might be called social dominance. At least in part does some heavy lifting there.
I mean, in a way, yeah, but not the way he's saying.
That's my entire experience writing this section. Yeah, kind of.
Like, he's not wrong, and he's also not right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Testosterone does increase aggression.
Yes.
And I guess in like a social space, being more aggressive means you could be more dominant. Sure. Okay. I guess. But then he starts actually explaining more in, quote, after 30 years of feminist influence and affirmative action programs, I put grown, there are only 7 female CEOs among the Fortune 500 corporations in the United States. That's right, 493 are males. Of the 100 U.S. senators, only 11 are women. The National Organization
Wait.
of... Yeah.
I'm so sorry. We're never going to get through this.
Go for it.
Is he somehow asserting that that's women's fault?
Oh, just wait for this.
Okay.
The National Organization of Women has pointed to these discrepancies to, quote, prove that patriarchy and discrimination prevail in the future. The more likely explanation, however, is biochemical and anatomical. Men, whose bodies surge with 10 to 20 times as much testosterone as in women, are more likely to reach for wealth, power, fame, and status because they are under that direction from within. Women, on the other hand, elect to bear children, which takes them out of the competition for a little while.
I'm sorry, but I have to go home now. That doesn't... Okay, you already said it, but this book is going to be so unhinged. Like, that doesn't even make any sense.
My writing for this book is also unhinged. I have entire sections that are rants that I'm just not going to go into.
I want to hear all of it.
But, like, don't worry about the fact that women can even vote until 1920, and the 144 years of the American system, not counting the institutionalized misogyny from Britain beforehand, takes a long time to undo. This is the slipperiness of the language that we've talked about in previous episodes. This is center stage. Dobson somewhat accurately describes testosterone. It can lead to higher aggression. Extrapolates that to say, therefore they're biologically socially dominant, which is not a thing. It's not an actual construct to measure. And extrapolates that bad point even further to say, men biologically should be CEOs and senators. We're so far away from the original point that is the impact of testosterone, which is an interesting conversation to have, but we've glossed over so many other factors. But Dobson's appeal to his readers' prior beliefs smooths over any of these tricks. It makes Dobson feel credible, and that's the point. Mm-hmm. You're not a bigot. You're smart for believing that men should be CEOs.
I just want to make sure I understand that his assertion here is that because men have more testosterone and are more aggressive and dominant, they would be better at running companies than women who he says are steady and compassionate.
Yes. The giving him way too much credit version is, it's not so much that they'd be better at it, but it's, of course they're going to be, because they're looking for power and status and wealth.
Okay.
Again, that's how it is, and therefore that's how it should be, as opposed to, that's how it is, but maybe we should do it differently. Mm-hmm. Not ever once entering the conversation.
No. Make America great again.
He goes into some bad brain science, saying things like the amygdala is larger in males than in females, which helps explain why boys are more likely than girls to be volatile, and engage in what psychotherapist Michael Guerin calls morally at-risk behavior. On one hand, this is technically true. On average, the amygdala in males' brains tends to be larger than that in female brains. But that is because, in general, male brains as a whole are larger than female brains as a whole, because male bodies typically tend to be larger than female bodies on the whole. We're also talking about huge generalizations that also kind of don't, when we get this large, kind of are don't matter. But whatever. Also, it just isn't true in a more meaningful sense.
Yeah, also don't be a size queen, Dobson.
It's not about the size, it's about what you do with it. Sex accounts for about 1% of brain differences when controlling for size. So proportionally, men and women have the same proportional amount of amygdala in their brains. I don't know why increasing the size then would mean it does more for you or less for you.
Right.
And then we get to the mythology of science. And this is a trick that evangelicals love to do, that Dobson loves to do. And this is a little bit of a longer quote, but I think it's useful. And it's about the sacrum, which is the pelvic bone, and how it has the same etymological origin, the same word of sacred. Mm. Quote, now we see the connection with the sacrum. It guards the pelvis and its birth canal, which is the origin of physical life. It contains the organs that produce the seeds of life in the ovaries. The sacrum, then, Brooke, this is seeming increasingly uncomfortable. The sacrum, then, is a holy bone with a very definite purpose.
A holy bone.
I got a couple unholy bones in my life.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It lends structural support to the developing baby within the womb, and that becomes increasingly important as the baby grows and gains weight. In God's eyes, this sacred place should never be violated with an abortionist's curette, suction apparatus, or trochar. I don't know how to pronounce that word. No pill or surgical weapon should violate that sacral domain. To enter this area for any reason other than to give aid to or deliver the life of that individual which temporarily resides there is not only a violation of that person's life, it is also a violation of and intrusion upon God's law.
Oh my God. Okay.
So that's a lot.
That's a lot. I mean, I'm not going to get into a whole thing about abortion. We all know about that. But, like, okay. So, like, what about surgery?
This is why this is why I said mythologize very specifically, because it's this, like, lofty idea. We saw this with, I'm going to get into abortion stuff for a second. We saw this with the Alabama Supreme Court ruling just this week as we're recording that says fertilized embryos are human beings. I guess, like, philosophically, we can have a conversation about when life begins. But when you take it out of the realm of myth and into practicality, it's just nonsense.
Yeah.
What about surgery? What about non-reproductive sex?
Right.
If that's not giving aid to the creation of life, is that still a violation?
Right. Like, if a woman has a hysterectomy, is that a violation?
Oh,
like,
they'd be so upset about that.
Yeah, like, what is he talking about? I mean, that whole quote is just because the word is sacrum, and that sounds like the word sacred.
They come from the same root in Greek. Mm-hmm. But that's the other thing. Evangelicals love to tie their beliefs back to a bad understanding of ancient Greece. That is very much how they see their lineage. It's also deeply bioessential. You are defined by your body parts. Your entire purpose, your sacred purpose as a woman, is to reproduce. And also, if that is sacred, if that is holy, then maybe it gives me permission to tell you how to use it.
Right.
Because we're not just dealing with individual rights. Fuck your individual rights. I'm talking about God.
As opposed to the notion that is sacred and holy and therefore belongs to the woman whose body it is, or the person whose body it is, and that she should ultimately have the say over her sacred body part, the holy bone.
Also, fundamentally, this is Dobson saying there is a right way to relate to your body. And I can tell you what it is. It's also important to listen to what he's not saying. I labeled this section Dobson Jazz because I had some wacky tobacco. He doesn't really talk about socialization at all. He gets into it for a hot second. He talks about how boys who bully may internalize the idea that aggression, popularity, and control naturally go together, and they may not hesitate to use physical aggression as a social strategy because it has worked in the past. Yeah, that's socialization, but he does not go any further than that. It's very individualistic. Here is what one boy might do, as opposed to these sweeping, like, huge generalities about biology. This is how you should be. Also, yeah, that is a problem. That is the socialization that fits into a feminist critique.
How can he not take into account socialization when it comes to children? And how early we learn that?
There's a big ahistoricity to his beliefs. The way that we see men and women now, according to Dobson, is the way that it's always been. Our ideas of men and women, according to Dobson, wrongly according to Dobson, have not changed. And therefore, individual differences must be socialization. Why is one kid more aggressive than the other? That's socialization. But why is our society set up in this way? Well, that's just God's will. That's just natural. So that's part one. I do want to talk briefly about the reality. Men and women are social constructs. You cannot measure man or woman biologically, objectively. There is no such thing. They've also differed throughout time and throughout culture in pretty significant ways.
Right.
There are differences generally between males and females. But even the idea of biologic sex itself is a social construct. Are we talking about chromosomes? Are we talking about hormones? Are we talking about fucking... what's the incel thing? Jaw shape or whatever. Like, technically those are biologic things that feature intersex, but there's no one biologic sex unifying thing. Sexual dimorphism is what we're talking about here. Sexual dimorphism is how different the sexes are in a species. While humans are somewhat sexually dimorphous, there are indeed some sex-based differences. We are relatively low in sexual dimorphism. Take the anglerfish. Specifically, the creatoid anglerfish. It's the one that you see in Finding Nemo with the big, like, nasty thing. So that is a female anglerfish. And you can tell because the male anglerfish is about 60 times smaller, about 1 million times lighter, and during reproduction just gets absorbed into the female's body.
Whoa.
The males and females of that species are vastly different.
Right.
Like, fundamentally. And when you have that broader perspective, looking at humans, you're like, oh, one's got tits. Okay. Interesting.
Uh-huh.
Much, though by no means all, of the differences observed between men and women is influenced by hormones, especially in puberty. It's also why, when you're working with like a trans kid, if they understand that they are trans before going into puberty, you get them puberty blockers and then the correct hormones to go through the correct puberty. They're pretty much almost identical to their cisgender peers in pretty much every marker. The height's the same, secondary sex characteristics are the same. Really, the only thing is like genitalia. And if that's how we're defining biologic sex, that's stupid.
Right.
Anyway, that's part one. Boys and girls are different.
Okay. You know, I think it's really interesting because I hadn't thought about that like humans aren't really, like male and female humans aren't really that different compared to other species in a lot of ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually true in a lot of mammals, right? Like, but yeah, there are some differences, sure, but we have leaned so heavily into those.
Yes.
And that's where socialization comes in, right? Because, okay, so if males have more testosterone and therefore can be more aggressive, then we assign them all of this aggression, right? Mm-hmm. And if women have more estrogen and can be more emotional, then we assign them all of this emotion. And that, how can anyone argue with that?
You can't. Not really, because it's not a real argument.
Yeah.
This is evolutionary psychology at its worst. Here's our answer. So this must have been for a reason. Let's create a story throughout history that supports this. Mm-hmm. Part 2. Socialism, feminists, and homosexual activists. Which I'm very proud of. Just the, like, meter of that.
Yeah.
Socialists, feminists, and homosexual activists have poisoned the culture and waged war against masculinity. And in that, men are uniquely and purposefully oppressed.
Men are uniquely and purposely oppressed.
Yes. That's actually where we're going to start. Let's break it down further. Boys are being feminized and torn down. Part 2, it's socialists, feminists, and homosexual activists. And part 3, they're doing it on purpose. Put a pin in the homosexual activists for now. We'll come back to that in part 2. Boys are being torn down by feminism, by attempting to equalize the sexes. Quote, some of my readers may be wondering at this point, why only boys? Why also not consider the needs of girls? Mm-hmm. The answer is that boys, even more than girls, are in serious trouble today. We've been hearing for 3 decades about how girls are being discriminated against, sexually harassed, disrespected, and given the short shrift in school.
Whiners.
There is some validity to these assertions, and steps are being taken to address them. But, big but, a chorus of social scientists is now warning of a crisis among males like nothing we've ever seen before.
I mean, I know gender is a construct, but I do want to say, like, imagine being a woman like me and hearing the fear that comes with the idea of feminizing someone. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, what a horrible thing it would be to be a woman. You know? Mm-hmm. Every time I hear that, I like have to laugh or I'll scream. But it's like, why do we all, even a lot of women, right? Like, why do we all agree that that's terrible?
Equal rights for women hurts men. Quote, when power, legal remedies are provided to one sex in order to eliminate a social justice, the other sex is left vulnerable and confused. Oh, you don't want to be sexually harassed? You want to be able to leave your husband who's physically abusing you? That makes me confused. And that's worse.
Oh, God. Yeah.
We've got more. Quote, Title IX funding by the federal government, which requires fair distribution of money to be allocated to each sex, has been a successful and beneficial initiative. At the same time, however, males have lost something valuable in the process. Sports have been the domain of boys for centuries. That world has been invaded, in some ways overtaken. I just wish there were more things that guys could do to define their masculinity. Not even combat is a man's exclusive responsibility today. So many aspects of our culture have become unisexual. No wonder boys only have a vague idea of what it means to be a man.
First of all, I think there's still plenty of toxic straight white men out in the world.
They find their
I don't
ways.
think it's. Yeah, I don't think they've disappeared completely as a species.
They may do, yeah.
So it's all right, James. Like, don't worry. But also, like, oh my God, we're supposed to be at home knitting, right? While y'all are playing the football. Is that what
Exactly.
It is? Okay.
I feel like Megan Rapinoe would also have some thoughts around the fact that it's been successful. He has... I'm not going to read all of these things, because at some point it just doesn't matter, but he has so many things about the National Science Foundation developed a $9 million program to interest girls in science, but there's no equivalent for boys. That's unfair. Is it, though? Boys are losing on almost every front because the system is stacked against them. Is it any wonder they're in such disarray today? How about private initiatives such as the much vaunted Take Our Daughters to Work Day? Tell me why boys should not be introduced to the workplace too. So, that is a real thing. Take Our Daughters to Work Day was created in 1992, and it still is practiced today. In 2023, about 3.5 million workplaces participated in this. But in 2003, it was renamed to Take Our Children to Work Day to officially include boys. The people who created it specifically said boys are already going to work with their dads.
Right.
Like, pretty commonly, especially in times before now. Most companies that participated in the program had, since the beginning, allowed both boys and girls to participate.
Yeah.
It's a not issue. Dobson, harps on things like this that aren't real and avoids actual real discrimination and oppression.
Right, like, you can still just take your son to work whenever you feel like it. It's just that this is a day to help introduce girls to the workplace. And this is also from a time period where that was more necessary. I mean, this is just, garbage.
Yes. Young boys aren't spared from the feminist attack. At a Boston area elementary school, nobody objected when girls wore shirts emblazoned with "Girls Rule," or when they taunted boys with the chant, "Boys go to Jupiter to get more stupider, girls go to college to get more knowledge."
Awesome.
He's using this as an actual point to show how boys are systemically oppressed. Women can get away with saying just about any demeaning, evil, harassing thing to men, while men get in trouble for making the most innocent compliment.
Oh, the most innocent compliment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I've experienced most of my life. The most of innocent compliments.
Have you considered just being a little hysterical right
Yeah,
now?
a little hysterical.
Are you on your period?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good day when I get the most innocent compliment.
And then there is a part about boys are being feminized. He quotes some asshole who believes that boys spend up to 80% of their time with women. Therefore, they don't know how to act as men when they grow up. That's why they're become more helpless and act more and more like big kids. We're trying to instill the feminine values of kindness and decency, which is confusing to men.
Kindness and decency?
I mean, that's in my quote, but...
Oh.
We'll talk about this a little bit later with his recommendations for how to raise a boy, but I do think it is important for people to have role models who are like them.
Sure.
Boys should have male role models, girls should have female role models, black people should have black role models, queer people should have queer role models. I think that's important.
Yeah.
But come on. We're at the end of this section. I have some random thoughts and quotes that I wanted to share that I don't have any other place to put them.
Okay, let's hear it.
This one's less funny, but I find some humor in it. My favorite example, he's talking about Me Too stuff, essentially, people wrongly getting accused of sexual assault. My favorite example of people wrongly calling things sexual assault is a third-grade boy accused of touching a girl on the breasts. Although it is perhaps fair to say that during a game of tag, he tagged her on the very spot where her breasts would presumably appear in 3 to 4 years. This is the part that got me. This is like being accused of robbing a bank that hasn't been built yet.
You have to be kidding me.
I read that and I literally screamed.
Oh my God.
It was when I read that, I'm like, oh, this is going to be a book. Okay.
Like robbing a bank that hasn't been built yet.
It also feels particularly gross because of the incredibly high prevalence of child sexual abuse in the church.
Yes. It feels so much like it's giving permission.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, that's scary. That one was just scary.
I don't like it.
Nope.
This one's much funnier.
Okay.
No wonder our kids are getting whipped in international academic competition. They may know how to use a condom, but too many of them can't compute, read, or write. My note is, in Alabama, they can't do any of those. And then he goes on to complain about cultural degeneracy, complains that porn is ruining our kids, calling it more addictive than cocaine or heroin, which just isn't true. He blames a lot of sex crimes on pornography. And then he talks about Ted Bundy!
You have got to be kidding! This guy is obsessed with Ted Bundy!
He talks about his interview with Ted Bundy as, like, proof that porn is ruining and corrupting and going to, like, lead to a bunch of serial killers.
He loves Ted Bundy so much. What does he say?
Oh, I don't have any quotes from here.
Okay.
It's the same shit that we've already talked about.
Oh my God.
This is the first book that I've read that he talks about his interview with Ted Bundy. And I forgot when I was reading this, I was so filled with rage about other things, I forgot he interviewed Ted Bundy. And then every time I hear about this, it's a nice little surprise again. It's a nice little treat.
Why did he interview Ted Bundy?
Because Ted Bundy specifically gave him the permission to do it, to have his last interview, to manipulate him so he would live in fame forever.
Right.
Dobson wanted to make a point about the dangers of pornography.
Because Bundy said pornography made him do it, right?
No, but yes. Mm-hmm. That's not technically what he said, but yeah, that's what he said.
I mean, according to Dobson.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And then, this is not funny or upsetting, but it is nerdy, and I care too much about it. He cites a study claiming, and this is a quote from the study, people have become less traditional over time, with a shift from emphasizing obedience in parent-centered families to valuing autonomy for children. Parents now expect their children to be self-disciplined, end quote. So, I looked up that article. I found that article. I read that article. That is not what the article says. That first part is what it... So the article is about evolving attitudes in culture around parents and families. It's a thing that happens every so often. It was a United States thing. The people have become less traditional with a shift away from obedience and parent-centered families to valuing autonomy for their children. That is there. The part around parents are now expect their children to be self-disciplined is not. That is nowhere in the article. Dobson just made that up. The article then goes on to say, but another traditional value, hard work, gained ground, up from 11% in 1986 to 18% in the 1990s. This indicates that the shift from traditional to modern is not as simple as depicted in previous research. While strictness and discipline had given way to a more liberal approach in raising and guiding children, hard work and perhaps other traditional values are growing in importance. So Dobson's entire point about cultural decay, he lied about, and also isn't what the report says.
This is I don't think there's anyone listening to this podcast who doesn't just also agree with us based on the title, right? So I don't think this is going to be interesting for anyone, but it's in case there is some random person out there listening, everything is based on this false reporting, right? And if you ask people to really find the research and the articles and really point to the evidence, no one ever can. Because it's all made up.
Or they point to it and the studies are flawed and bad and wrong,
right.
And the authors have to retract their studies, which happens a number of times throughout this book. Got him! Meaning will never be held accountable and will die incredibly wealthy and powerful.
Wait, I forgot. Is he still alive?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, God. I just keep wishing he was dead, and then I forget, and it's... Okay.
Part 2 of this argument. Boys are being hurt. Part 2 is socialists, feminists, and homosexual activists are the ones doing it.
Right.
Quote, it is impossible to understand what is happening to our kids today without considering the influence of feminist ideology. Swirling out of it was an attack on the very essence of masculinity. Everything that has been associated with maleness was subject to scorn. I would say subject to analysis.
Yeah.
Not necessarily scorn. He says that feminists create divorce, he hates divorce and says that it causes irreparable damage to kids, especially boys. Now, there are some studies that say that boys do take divorce harder than girls. Yes. In general.
And, at least from what I learned, you probably know more, that, even in itself, also depends on the age of the boy.
There's so many contextual factors. Research like this is broad generalities that, it's good to be mindful of, but there's so many other stuff that goes into it. It's also not inherent to, the X chromosome of a boy. To me, it's a lot of socialization. Right. That actually was a question on my licensing test.
Really?
Just a stat you have to know. Does divorce impact boys or girls or equal? So, thanks, Illinois. It was a national test.
Can I tell you one thing really quick?
Yeah.
You don't have to use it, but on my test, one of the questions was, a bisexual enters your office. Blah, blah, blah. What do you do? And I remember being like, a bisexual enters my office every day in the form of myself.
A bisexual enters your office. You hand them 2 cookies. You make them pick one. That's hilarious.
I remember laughing out loud when I got there.
Talking about divorce again. This God-ordained institution, marriage, which has prevailed in almost every culture of the earth for more than 5,000 years, is unraveling right in front of our eyes. No-fault divorce is still the law of the land in most states, resulting in thousands of unnecessary family breakups. First of all, marriage, as we understand it today, has not existed in every culture on earth for more than 5,000 years.
5,000 years.
I don't actually know that Dobson's a creationist, so this is a bit of an assumption. But I believe Dobson thinks the world is 6,000 years old. But also, the part that is most red flag to me is no-fault divorce.
Yeah.
That is a still present and growing talking point among the Republican Party. Especially in a post-Roe v. Wade world, they are now targeting more things about women's autonomy, essentially. Fertilization and IVF, like what happened with the Alabama Supreme Court. No-fault divorce is absolutely on that chopping block as well. Again, probably don't need to say this to the people that are listening, but I have a rant and I'm going to say it. Without no-fault divorce, women are trapped in abusive relationships, often because women don't report abuse. If their husband is their whole world, like Dobson wants, taking him away would kill the family and the kids. Further, we know that cops don't take reports of abuse seriously because a disproportionate amount of cops are also perpetrators of intimate partner violence. 30% in one report, and that's probably an undercounting.
Yeah.
There's so many reasons why a woman or a person doesn't report abusive relationships, and the ability just to leave when they can is life-saving for them and also their kids. Mr. I claim to care about kids. Mm-hmm. Also, evangelicals don't want people to get too divorced even in abusive relationships. This is anecdotal, this is personal, but I had a family member who was in an incredibly abusive marriage, and we were going to a Southern Baptist church. My mom was like trying to get help and support from the pastor, and the pastor told her she shouldn't get divorced.
Oh my God.
They just need to work it out. I hate this pastor.
Oh my God.
Also, not that it matters, but that family member wasn't even a Christian, so it's not even like, according to my beliefs, here's what I would do. Even though those beliefs are terrible and shitty, it's let me impose my will, my virtues onto someone who doesn't agree, doesn't want any of that. It's not about safety for kids. It's not about families. It's about control. That's all of what this is. The last little bit, he says blended families can't work, with an important caveat at the end. I can tell you that the Brady Bunch, the notion that a mom and dad with 3 kids each can create one happy family without conflict or rivalries, is a myth. It just doesn't happen that way.
No family can be without
right.
conflict.
Oh, your family's not perfect? Well, that must mean it's a failure. You fight. But also, the little end of this sentence, it doesn't happen that way. Although many blended families do eventually adjust to their new circumstances.
Right.
Blended families are fine. They are healthy. They can be. I mean, any family can be healthy or not, but...
Also, he's not remembering that blended families come from other directions than divorce, too. Right? The Brady Bunch, they're both widows, I believe. You know, I think that was it. But either way, that could be the reason for a blended family, is his assertion that if you are young and you have a young child and your spouse dies, that's it.
He goes on to say some like really gross things about how a parent is always going to harbor more loyalties for the kid that's theirs than the kid that got married into the family.
Oh, that's so disgusting.
Yeah.
That's bordering on like weird adoption stuff too.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's not talked about here, but the evangelical relationship with adoption is super gross.
It's disgusting, and I do know about that. And it is so, look at the charity we're doing for this poor baby.
Oh, absolutely.
Which is like revolting.
It's like the worst kind of performative activism.
Yeah.
The final part of this second argument, we have boys are being hurt. It's the feminists and faggots who are doing it. Part 3, they're doing it on purpose.
But really quickly, what was the part about the bone again?
Oh, the holy bone?
Holy bone. Okay.
They're doing it on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Quote, well, the bra burners are gone now, and much of their rhetoric has been discredited. Nevertheless, disciples of those early feminists and their liberal allies in the media, universities, and entertainment industry continue to shape our attitudes and mores. They know what they're doing. They know it's not true, and they're going ahead with it anyway. They're doing it on purpose. Yeah. Specifically to hurt boys and men.
Right.
Because they hate them.
Right.
No, Dobson, I hate you. I don't hate men.
It couldn't be because they want to be treated with a fraction of what boys and men get in the world.
No, that's absurd.
Yeah.
They already do. We fixed it. We did a feminism, like, once that fixed it, and now you're just bitching and moaning. Come on. He goes on many rants about how you don't see men depicted meaningfully. They're always the butt of the joke. We don't see strong men. Quote, a centerpiece in hostility towards masculinity is seen in an ongoing effort to convince us that men are fools. It claims that the majority of males are immature, impulsive, selfish, weak, and not very bright. It is interesting to note, for example, how disrespect for men pervades the entertainment industry, including many television commercials. Television sitcoms are also blast away at traditional masculinity, much like a wrecking ball crashing into a building. After enough direct hits, the structure begins to crumble. There is not a single example, as I write, of a healthy family depicted on networking programming that includes a masculine guy who loves his kids and is respected by his wife. None.
I mean, that's wild. First of all, of course there were. Second of all, there are an equal amount of movies, especially when I'm thinking up to 2001, when this book was published, of, like, men jumping from rooftop to rooftop and, like, hyper masculinity, right? And let's talk about how women are depicted in movies, especially at this time. It is only about falling in love. It is only about finding a man at this point in history.
But it's also about them girl bossing, becoming CEOs, and that's a man's job. He does talk about, like, you see women in these badass careers, and men are always seeming dumb. There's an entire chapter titled Men Are Fools. It's like this media thing that was being pushed. And how women, you would never see a woman disparaged in the same way. The face Brooke just made.
Remember a little movie that came out around this time called Shallow Hal?
I do not. This is the first time hearing about Hal.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Can I tell you what this movie is?
Please, what is Shallow Hal?
It's Gwyneth Paltrow. Do you know who that is?
Yes.
Okay.
The skiing lady.
Gwyneth Paltrow. Now, she has apologized for this since. Gwyneth Paltrow plays a fat person who believes that she's thin or, like, has some body dysmorphia, like, doesn't realize how fat she is. Yeah. And the whole joke is that if, like, during the movie, if it's from her point of view, she looks like Gwyneth Paltrow. If it's from his point of view, she's a big fat fatty. And, like, she'll sit on a bench and someone goes flying. Like, it is the most offensive movie ever.
I don't like that.
And this is one example of a trillion things like this. I mean, how could he even like, this argument is so stupid.
Because, again, he's not really making an argument. It's listen to what he's feeling, not what he's saying.
Right, that's right.
He feels under attack. He feels victimized, etc., etc. When I go to my gay-ass gym, I have to watch on the TV is Tim Allen, who's an evangelical, his show. It's a horrible sitcom titled Last Man Standing, where he plays exactly the type of dad you're complaining about. I have to watch this in my rainbow bubble that is Chicago. It breaks through that. It's everywhere. What the fuck you... There's also entire, like, media systems run by evangelicals. You got Pure Fix. You got Living Waters. You've got so many of them. It's like, what are you talking about? You just feel aggrieved.
Right. I'm still not going to give up this idea, though, that, like, there's a couple of movies where women run a company, and that cancels out the hundreds of movies where women are, like, in crop tops and do nothing more than just, like, have sex. I mean, like, the idea that women aren't fetishized and women in movies are made dumb or whatever it is, like...
Well, that's not offensive. That's just true.
Oh, right.
They're not being demeaned there.
I hate this so much. I hate James Dobson.
Surprisingly, I hate James Dobson, too. We'll end with two last quotes about how we know they're doing it on purpose.
Okay.
One of the primary objectives of the National Education Association and the United States Department of Education, reminder, this is under George W. Bush, one of their main objectives of the Department of Education is assuring that homosexual propaganda is taught to every kid in America.
I wish.
They're hurting boys. It's the feminists and faggots, and they're doing it on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
We've now come to the last part of episode 1. As a result, we need to train boys to be proper men again. We need to make men great again. According to Dobson, what constitutes a good family man? What are we trying to go for? They're the family provider. They're the leader. They're the protector. They're the spiritual. They provide spiritual direction. Those are what Dobson says makes a good family man. If your definition of masculinity involves a healthier version, but a version of these things, that's fine. But there's some really horrible stuff mixed in. Like when he talks about men being the leader of the family, he says dad should be the final arbiter of issues. And he acknowledges, quote, admittedly, this headship role was sometimes abused by selfish men who treated their wives and children with disrespect. But it was never the way it was supposed to function.
What do you think happened? Now, really, as a therapist, you put your therapist brain on for a second. What do you think happened to James Dobson that made him so defensive of protecting like manhood?
He just grew up all the time hearing, feeling, believing that he was so special. And then the realities of the 60s and 70s were like, hey, let's reassess what all of this is. And he felt so threatened and saw people not dealing with that adjustment well, which did happen.
Yeah.
And then it was like, this is societal decay. My feelings of being aggrieved, of being oppressed are correct.
Yeah. What he doesn't connect, though, is that what he is terrified of is being treated like a woman or like a homosexual or like any other person. It is terrifying to him to think of losing that privilege and having to be treated that way. But he can't connect that, like, yeah, it sucks. That's why we have feminists and that's why we have these things. He cannot connect that.
I have this somewhere in the script. I think I skipped over it. But this entire book, especially these parts of it, are like the most obvious example of when you're used to privilege, equal rights feels like oppression.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's not even talking about equal rights. Like, some of it is, like, Title IX, sure, but, like, for the most part, feminism is still an ongoing project. We still are ruled by patriarchy. It is not dismantled. As much as I wish that were true, we're still very much living in a patriarchal society.
Yeah.
Very much a homophobic society. All of these systems of oppression, we've, like, now have words for them.
Right.
Sometimes we have better laws. But, like, Dobson, my dude. I have the word snowflake written so many times in the script. Okay, so we have a model of masculinity that we're working towards. How do we teach boys about it? Well, they need dads. Not male role models, specifically their dad. And again, we're getting into like bad science mythology. Quote, infants are born with a drive to connect with their fathers. As they begin to speak, the word for father often precedes the word for mother.
Okay.
The reasons for this are unknown.
No, they are not. That is hilarious.
I wrote, we actually do the fuck no.
Do you think it's because the baby's like, I really want to show my dad that he's the power? Like, no.
That's what Dobson's saying.
It's because it's easier to go da, da, da than ma, ma, ma when you are a lump of human flesh.
Yes. That is quite literally the full explanation for it. But again, much like the holy bone thing, he's...
You're a holy bone.
Specifically not my holy bone, unfortunately. He's taking this, like, observation in science and linguistics, creating some, like, mythologized capital T truth about it.
Yeah.
And connecting it to this other bullshit argument.
That's so wild.
Oh, I didn't include the quote. No. Oh, no. Okay. So there's another quote here that one of the reasons that he needs a dad specifically is so that he can see his dad's penis in the shower.
Yeah, we're invoking our friend Freud now.
Yes. Oh, when we get to the next part, there's so much, in the next episode, so much Freudian shit.
So a boy needs to see his dad's penis in order to what?
So he knows what his will look like one day.
What?
To become a man. I guess.
Okay.
Dobson says, not having a dad is the biggest risk for delinquent boys. Quote, 30 years ago, it was believed that poverty and discrimination were primarily responsible for juvenile crime. Now we know it's family dysfunction.
Oh.
So pause, again with slippery language.
Yeah.
family dysfunction does not necessarily mean absence or presence of dad.
Right.
There is something to be said about, especially as a family therapist, I do look at the systemic factors and how a family is functioning. And sometimes the dysfunction in a family system does present through a person and a kid. Parents are fighting, kids are having behavioral problems at school. That does happen.
Yeah.
But poverty and discrimination also are huge factors to that.
Right.
And as we've talked about, I think every episode so far, kids need parents. Kids ideally need two parents in our capitalistic hellscape. They don't need, in air quotes, a dad.
Right.
Dads are great. Love my dad. They don't need a dad.
We can Google a picture of a penis and show it to them.
Also says need dad to roughhouse, but you can't say that anymore because the woke CPS will arrest you. Child Protective Services. Kids do need to use their bodies.
Yeah.
And roughhousing is not inherently bad. One, anyone can do that with a kid. Also, some men don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. And two, no one's going to arrest you. If you're, like, abusing your child, sure.
Right.
I'm not here to defend CPS either. Fuck CPS. But, like...
It's just all, like, garbage science.
Yeah.
Like, anyone can roughhouse with a kid can roughhouse with another kid, a girl kid can roughhouse. Like, none of this makes any sense.
Again, I don't think I'm the target audience here, but multiple of my bullies in elementary school were girls who physically beat me up. They were roughhousing. It was just because I was a little pussy and couldn't take it.
Oh, Jake.
It's fine. I'm sure they had their own behavioral problems at home. How else to train a kid so you have an idea of masculinity. They need a dad so they can see his penis. Part 3, homeschool them.
Again with the homeschooling.
If we had to do it all over again, Shirley and I would probably have homeschooled our children. At the time they were young, homeschooling was not fashionable. I had never even heard of it. Given that lack of information, I unwittingly helped start the homeschool movement that is now spreading around the world.
I like that he's like, we didn't do this. I'd never even heard of it. I have no experience with this. He 100% would not have stayed home and homeschooled his children.
Oh, they would have been homeschooled. It would have been him doing it.
Right. When he says we would have homeschooled our children. And yet he's going to become the authority on this and why it's best. Okay, great.
Also, and this part gets me, quote, "It is known now that the success of homeschoolers is virtually universal." For any of our homeschooled audience, I'll give you a second to react to that.
Yeah, just take that in. I'm going to try to bite my tongue because I don't want to get into a fight with anyone about homeschooling, but like, I don't know. We don't have home doctors. We don't have home.
Homeschooling is also not a monolith. There's so many contextual factors that lead to, is this going to be successful or not? Right. Why are you homeschooling them? Are they bullied? Do they not have the resources?
Yeah.
I have a younger brother with significant disabilities. He's not homeschooled, but like, it's a conversation. Can the school provide for his needs?
Right.
Also, if you take your kid out of homeschooling, are you teaching them? Are you certified to teach anything? Are you giving them tutors?
That's right. Co-op? It's just like anything else, right? Where it's like, there are versions of this where that might be better and versions where it isn't. But he assumes everything works for everyone in the same way. Mm-hmm.
Or it should. And if it's not, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Quote, "Finally, I urge you to base your teachings about sexuality and also gender on the scriptures, which tell us, quote, God created man in his own image. Jesus, who was the first Jewish leader to give dignity and status to women, said, haven't you read that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female? So, hey, that's anti-Semitic." Mm-hmm. There absolutely were Jewish leaders and traditions long before Jesus who valued women. Judaism still is patriarchal, still has its own problems. Christianity is still fucking patriarchal and has its problems. So we're here talking about this shit. Also gets into gender complementarianism, which is the nice way of describing Dobson's gender beliefs, that men and women are inherently different and play complementary roles. That's why they have to be different. It's not that men are better than women, it's just that men are supposed to be leaders and women are supposed to be subservient. Uh-huh. That's just complementary.
Yeah.
People are different. But one of the beauties of relationships is being in with someone who is different from you. Me and my boyfriend both have dicks, but we're different and we complement each other in really meaningful ways. Gender complementarianism, my butt. So, that's Bringing Up Boys in a nutshell. That's the text of the book. That's the argument. It's probably the worst rolling papers you could ever imagine. The arguments are based on bad science, a willfully incorrect understanding of history, and a narrow and fragile view of masculinity. I want to end this episode by revisiting the question I posed up top to you. What does a healthy, positive masculinity look like to you?
Being a feminist, right? Like, that is not something that only women should be. We all should be feminists. And I think a healthy, I mean, like, what is masculinity? I don't know, right? But I feel like everyone should be a feminist. And reducing feminism to equal rights is also like, that's not exactly
It's a
the whole
scapegoat.
thing. Yeah.
It's a straw man.
Right, yeah. But, like, when you reframe feminism, well, not even reframe it, but when you understand feminism to be like, hey, respect this human person who, like, is a female, right? That's where the arguments all fall apart, right? So to me, a healthy relationship with masculinity is someone who has a healthy understanding of femininity and feminism.
I love that. I took some notes. I've also had more time to think about this because I gave it to you an hour ago. Fundamentally, I have some traits written down, but they're not at odds with femininity. I disagree that masculinity and femininity are separate sides of a spectrum. They're just different constructs. So any traits that I say absolutely can be held by people of any gender. It does not mean that you are masculine because you have them or not. But I wrote things like camaraderie. Saturdays are for the boys. I think that's cute. I think that's like masculinity I'm down with. Courage, justice, strength, but also softness. And as I was writing this list, I realized I'm just describing my older brother.
Aww.
Which I think is very sweet.
That's sweet.
So
I hope you're listening, Kevin.
I love you, Kevin. His name is but I love you, Kevin. And it is on that note we're going to end episode 1. Listeners, I love you. Brooke, I love you. James Dobson, I fucking hate you.
Incredible.
Woo. I Hate James Dobson is a labor of love. Written, recorded, edited, and produced by me, Jake. I'm honored to be joined by my amazing co-host, Brooke. If you're enjoying the show, please consider rating and reviewing it. If you want to connect with us more, you can find us on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at I Hate James Dobson, and on Twitter at I Hate JDobs. Special thanks to Drew, Lindsay, DJ, and Jack. Our theme music is by Mood Maze, and the song is called Trendsetter. Thank you for enjoying our show.